Our week 3 special guest is George Friday, who is an active participant and behind the work of North Carolina's The Poor People's Campaign. And so, Robin, if you could just briefly introduce our guest, and then George will do an introduction and we'll get started with some Q&A.
Yes. So, as Wes mentioned, this week we have George Friday, pronouns she, they. They are one of the tri-chairs of the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign. So, just a little bit about their organization. Um, the Poor People's Campaign is a moral fusion movement to build power, moral activism, and voter participation to ensure that the nation's poor and low income people are no longer ignored, dismissed, or pushed to the margins of our political and social agenda. The Poor People's Campaign seeks to challenge the myth of scarcity in the midst of abundance and demands that the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism all be ended. Thank you so much for being here, George.
It's my pleasure. I'm actually looking forward to this evening and even all of your questions. There are plenty. So hi there, I'm George Friday. Um, I'm a native North Carolinian, something I'm very proud of. And feeling rough for you there, Robin. You working in Chapel Hill, living in evil Durham. I graduated from UNC, so that's enough said about Durham and Chapel Hill. I'll leave it alone. um, but I grew up before high school in Lincolnton, North Carolina. And I am 64. So I was born in 1959. And when I was a kid, the Grand Dragon of the KKK lived in Hickory. Hickory is 25 miles from North Carolina, actually, about 25 miles from me now in Shelby. And they march every year down Main Street. And my grandparents lived on Main Street. We did too. But I always thought of it as a parade. My grandpa would stand on the sidewalk with his hunting rifle.
Yeah.
And as the kids, we could sit on the porch of my grandparents' house, but we couldn't go out. We thought of it as a parade. They never told us it was anything different. And we never questioned that why grandpa had his hunting rifle, because he always had his rifle. Not always, but often. So that's a trippy image. I said I'm 64. I was born in 1959. What's more important, at least to me in my life and choices, is that I was born on August 6th, 1959. So my life's long work since college has been to work for peace, ending nuclear weapons, ending violence in all forms, all that groovy stuff. So I'm going to shut up so y'all can answer your questions. And I may, Robin, need to be able to share my screen for some of your responses. I thought about some of them, maybe about 3 or 4. The rest we'll just have to see.
Oh, no worries. We can definitely make that happen.
Okay. And I'm likely to run away at 9 o'clock because unlike out west, I have not had dinner. So 9 o'clock, I'll be ready for it.
We definitely appreciate your time and appreciate you being here with us. So I'll go ahead and get started. So if you could just tell our group about your organization and how it came about, and about a little bit more about its primary mission.
Okay. Well, Reverend William Barber, who is one of the 2 religious roots of the work. The other person is Liz Theoharis from Philadelphia. But Reverend Barber reminds us that we are in not an organization, but an organism. The intention is to create a mass movement from the bottom up that doesn't make requests for policy change, but makes demands. Because when you build adequate power, you don't say, please, sir, master. You say, you're going to do it like this. And that's what we're trying to build. I know, and y'all who aren't in North Carolina may have never heard of Moral Mondays. In the mid 2010s, maybe starting 16, 2017. Usually February, second Saturday, was HK on J, Historic Thousands on Jones Street. Jones Street in Raleigh is where the state assembly is, the General Assembly is. The people that do crazy things like say teenagers have to get permission for their parents for birth control, and you can only teach these things in school. They've done that this year and last year, the General Assembly. So HK&J started then, started small. People got arrested, mostly white people, which is part of your responsibility. And over time, it just grew and grew. And then near the 60th anniversary, possibly, of the Poor People's March on Washington with King, I know there was a specific date, I don't have it exactly in my head, when Reverend Barber says we have to take this national and build for a national movement to change conditions for low wealth and poor people. And that was 2018, 2019 was the beginning of what we have here as the Poor People's Campaign, a call for moral revival. Early on, I remember Reverend Barber talking about that the country had to have a heart transplant because we weren't emotionally connecting with each other in a way that can sustain peace. And as we progressed, he said, that's not enough. We need more than that. So now we are in a place where we are calling for and trying to build a third Reconstruction. So if you go to the website, I saw some of the materials that Wes put out there was the website. If you go to the website, across the top, you'll see third Reconstruction. That's the work that is the focus currently. We began with 14 policy priorities, and I can share those with you if you're interested in seeing what those 14 are. Are you? Yes, really? Okay. So I need to share my screen. Let me pull it up and then go to share screen. Okay. There it is. All right. Here we go. This was early on, these were identified as the policy priorities. And we're talking now, this is 2020, the new administration that came in 2020. So the Poor People's Campaign had started the summer before, and I'm going to roll through these, assuming you can read them. If there are people who can't see or they're on the phone, I could read them out loud. What do you think, Robin?
I can read it on my screen. Maybe if we just read the heading and then if you talk to
that's
them.
all I want to focus on.
Gotcha.
So we're talking 2020, when the beginning of this. So number one, enact comprehensive, free, and just COVID-19 relief. I'm going to roll quickly, but you can see three at once here. Number two, guarantee quality healthcare for all, regardless of any pre-existing conditions. 3, raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour immediately. 4, update the poverty measure. That, if you go on the website to the 14, you can look to see what is the rationale behind these. There's really good cause for the poverty measure that's currently being used is so skewed as to give a sense that there isn't really poverty. Poverty isn't really the fourth leading cause of death in this country, which it is. So that's not good. 5, guarantee quality housing for all. No matter where you are in the country now, talk to someone who has a minimum wage income and ask them about housing. It's crazy. You have to have a ton of money to get housing these days. I had to do it months ago and it was crazy. 6, enact a federal jobs program to build up investments, infrastructure, public institutions, climate resilience, energy efficiency, and socially beneficial industries and jobs in poor and low-income communities. 7, protect and expand voting rights and civil rights. 8, guarantee safe, quality, and equitable public education with supports for protection against resegregation. 9, comprehensive and just immigration reform. 10, ensure all of the rights of Indigenous people. 11, enact fair taxes. 12, use the power of executive orders. 13, redirect the bloated Pentagon budget towards these priorities as matters of national security. 14, work with the Poor People's Campaign to establish a permanent presidential council to advocate for this bold agenda. So that's where we started in terms of policy asks. We've continued to move through that and organize state by state from the bottom up, lifting the voices of those who are impacted. And it's the kind of work that feels like it can make a lasting, deep, and sustained difference. And it's up to us to make that real. Okay, your questions, Robin. That was one thing. I hope I told you. Oh, I didn't tell you the core issues. It is to end systemic racism, poverty, environmental devastation, militarism in the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious something bad. Say it again, Robin. Religious nationalism. I wanted to not say fascism because that's what I'm thinking, but you know, try not to go overboard. What's your next question, Robin?
So, your organization states that poverty is a policy choice.
Yep.
This is a sentiment that's echoed in the book as well. What are some key policy goals that your organization is pushing for government leaders to tackle and to address poverty specifically? And you kind of answered this in the beginning, but if you wanted to elaborate on any here, we'd appreciate that.
I just want to encourage you all to check out the third Reconstruction. I'm going to share a little bit with that with you on screen in a minute, but part of it is our own biases. So white supremacy is ubiquitous. If I'm telling you something you don't know, I'm surprised. It's in everything. It's in the air we breathe, everything we read, everything we watch, just like heterosexism and misogyny. So you actually have to consciously make that not part of who you are. So there are all kinds of assumptions about people that don't have enough money. Even the word poor denotes a deficit. And I'm a low-income person. I struggle economically, but I know I have no deficits in will or imagination or creativity or ambition. And the policy choice is because poverty is not a personal problem with a personal solution. It's a political problem with a political solution. There's a decision to make people poor and to keep people poor. And lots of ways that gets supported by the culture and the decisions that we make. So I'm not going to have 20 examples of that for you because I just don't. But you know, you could do your own homework or read the book. It's a good book. So now I'm going to show you some of what's in the third Reconstruction. The PDF for the third Reconstruction is 12 or 14 pages. No, 17 pages long. Good gracious. So there's no way I can help by showing you all of that. But what I can show you is some of the policy demands that are seen as ways to help mitigate the fact that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death. So what's here in the third Reconstruction PDF? Early on in the work, there would be a did you know and then a demand. So all of those 14 demands I showed y'all earlier are based on data that was collected in a report that you can find on the website called The Souls of Poor Folk or something like that. It's a report that predated the formation of the Poor People's Campaign, a call for moral revival, but informed what the policies were. So this did you know speaks about poverty being widespread and a common experience in the US. It's not an anomaly. It's not an exception. It is rampant. And it says here, before the pandemic, there were 140 million poor and low wealth people in the country. That number has grown. So because of that, so I'm going to try to show y'all the therefores, the rationales there, and then the therefores. Therefore, we demand that our politics, policies, laws, and legislation center and prioritize the poor. So here's the did you know about so many people who earn less than $15 an hour. And y'all know now that it needs to be $20 an hour. So therefore, we demand that every person has the right to work with dignity. Did you know that the great wealth of this country is being held by a very small number of people? Therefore, we demand the ultra rich, corporations, and Wall Street pay their fair share. Deep breath, not to cuss. Okay. And fourth, did you know that it costs more to not address poverty and inequality than to fully address these injustices? That's one of the policy decisions that doesn't make sense, but is a choice by those in power, because in the same way they don't want people to organize across lines of race or class or sexual identity, is because when we outnumber them, you know, they have to give it up. So we demand that the great wealth, resources, and capacity of this nation be directed towards expanded social welfare programs that center the poor rather than corporations and the wealthy, so that we can all fare well. Because the rich get serious, serious welfare. Voting rights and democracy under attack. Therefore, where are you? Wow, there's a lot on that. Therefore, we demand the right to meaningfully participate in the decisions that impact our lives by expanding voting rights, securing our democracy against extremist threats and violence. Okay. Tens of millions are denied adequate health care. We want health care for all. I'm moving quickly, but I don't want to rush. I know you have more questions. Did you know that millions of people can't afford basic needs like housing, food, water, and utilities? Amen to that. Therefore, we demand that everyone's basic needs to housing, food, water, and utilities are met. Okay. I'm making an executive decision to stop there, Robin, because I want to hear your other questions. But I will put the link to this in the chat so that people can go there themselves.
Awesome.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much. And I think Wes may have put the link for that in the chat, and we'll
Good.
also get that sent out to our participants as well. Thank you for taking us through that.
I'm not a great multitasker, so thanks for you doing that. Your other questions, I want to roll through them if I can.
Gotcha. And
My
we'll try
sister
to
brought
go-
dinner, and it smells good.
Gotcha. So in his book, Desmond claims that most discourse around poverty advocacy uses the language of working people or families or tenants, but not specifically the word poor. And your organization is one that explicitly uses that word. Why does your organization feel that it's important to use that term?
We don't want to erase people. We don't want to, and we're not in the process of creating a transformative experience for people so that they don't see themselves as poor. You know, even though I said earlier, poor implies deficit, but it also, that word captures the meaning of what policy needs to pay attention to. Because politicians, I said earlier, I'm not fond of political parties and corporations and elected officials. So, but I remember maybe the last presidential debate I watched. I can't remember the year. It was some time back. It was maybe 2020 elections. So that would be 2019 or possibly before then. But neither candidate ever said the word poor. Like we were invisible. So that's part of the reasons of saying it, is naming it so that people don't ignore the reality that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death, that there are at least 140 million poor people right now in this country. A lot of them are children and women. And that if those low income and poor people register and vote, they can change the political landscape of this country permanently. Full stop.
100%. Thank you for that. So now we have a couple more questions, just a few, and then we'll open it up to audience participation. So this one is one from one of our co-hosts, Kara. So a quote from the demands that from the Poor People's Campaign. We remain in the dark about who is poor, and this ignorance prevents us from being able to address the broad and deep poverty in our midst. And you just spoke to that a little bit ago as well. We have the right to know the true state of our union. What are some ways that the average concerned citizen can begin to address this invisibility?
Well, aligning yourself with people who are doing work to transform the situation where you live. So that might be the social justice committee to church. It may be a community organization in a low-income community or a people of color community. So one of the things I like to encourage people to do is who has the boot on their neck where you live? Who is getting their ass kicked on a regular? It might be a migrant community or trans folks or queer folks or young people. But everywhere in this country, every community, somebody has the boot on their neck. Somebody is worried when they leave the house. Those are the people you want to build relationship with and ally with to work to transform that situation. And then connect with more people doing similar work and more people doing similar work. You have the model for the Poor People's Campaign. I remember, this is many years ago. You know, I've done this for like over 40 years. I'm an old lady now, but in Asheville, which is in the mountains, I was doing work around civil liberties for folks there, searches by police, surveillance, trying to stop that kind of thing. And there was, at that time, in the early 20 teens, there was and you probably know a little bit about this, Robin. In a matter of 2 or 3 years, there was an explosion among the Latino population. It went to 5 people to 4,000 in rural communities. Asheville was one of those. And a lot of people weren't documented. And a lot of local police branches were creating alliances with ICE so that when they would stop someone and that person didn't have documentation, they would be detained and go to an ICE detention center. Well, it is not the responsibility of the local police or the sheriff's department or any other law enforcement agency to do the work of ICE. Those people can say, we're not going to do it. So what we set up in Asheville was at the mobile home area where most of the migrant folks lived, there was only one entrance and one road. And on weekends, when was the most time that people would get profiled, that's the only word I can think of, is racial profiling. We would, those of us who are US citizens would camp out at that entrance between 9:30 at night and 1:30 in the morning. And we'd have shifts. And if the police came, we'd chase them off. I'm not saying chase them off like this, but just, why are you here? What are you doing here? You have no legal need to be here. We are making sure this is a safe place for people to enter. You got to go. And that was some of the most inspiring and uplifting work I've done in my career. It was awesome. So and the people who live there in Asheville were the folks who were creating those relationships, and then getting people to the point where they could register to vote and being able to get a new county commissioner. There is a reparations ordinance in Asheville, North Carolina that came out of that work, and agreement that the police will not do the work of ICE. And you might need that where you live, who knows, or something similar.
Yeah, I do. You're right. I do recall that. I remember that. And it was so impactful in multiple ways also because a lot of people being undocumented are afraid to assert their rights. So as you said, those of us who are, even though we are marginalized in different ways, that's an area of privilege that we have, and we can
Right.
exercise that privilege to help others. Yeah.
Yes. One of the things you want to do when working with people is use privilege strategically. Every single one of us has privilege. It's not the same for everyone. Sometimes you say, okay, we need a white guy to do this. Wes, go do it. We need a younger woman of color to do it. Robin, you got that. We need someone who has a legal background or has a PhD. You figure it out and you make it happen. It's cool.
Yeah. And I think that also speaks to, I love that sentiment to use privilege strategically. It really speaks to the importance of cross-cultural, cross-class, cross-ability organization, because then we can find those ways where one person has privilege, they can pick up the baton. And when another person needs help, they can help pick up the load. Yeah.
Yep.
So for our next question, I'm going to pass the baton to Kara so she can ask. This is another one coming from Kara. Our previous question was from Kara as well.
Yeah.
So Kara, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. So Desmond writes that only 1 in 4 of those folks eligible to receive federal housing assistance actually do. And what I'm wondering is, has the Poor People's Campaign found any research to explain why this is? And
I know that there's a lot of research being done, Kara, by the repairs of the breach.
excellent.
And some of that is on the website, or you may email some of the people who are there on the website, some of the national staff about some of it. I know that part of the issue is just the internalized classism and shame that gets put on low income and poor people. I remember in the days when I would accompany my siblings or my parents to go seek out help, and the workers were not very open or friendly, and they, the treatment of people, very disrespectful, very much judgmental, and it wasn't tolerable. So some people would rather deal with their situation than have to put up with being treated less than human. And that may have changed some. I don't know. It's been a while since I've had to do that. But I do know that when I want to hand out material and catch low wealth people, I go to court on the day for traffic violations. That's when you get people who don't have any insurance. That's when you get people whose license had expired and they couldn't afford to renew it. That's when you get people who are undocumented and don't have licenses. And you can sit while they're waiting on their court appearance and talk to them, or when they come out and talk to them, or give them a flyer. It's a good place to connect with people.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. And you want to connect with people where they are. You don't want them to come to you.
Right.
Right.
Right. I wonder if there are policy changes that can help somehow or make it not so stigmatized that, folks don't want to show up. I mean, or something.
Well, if we can normalize is not the word I want to use, but if we can take some of the stigma off of that word poor,
Right.
let people be able to say, yes, I need support. I need help. I can't make it in this and that. We're not there yet. I know that, but it would help. At the same time, trying to create every opportunity for people to realize their own power and use it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Back to you, Robin.
Thank you, Kara. So if you have any questions for George, please go ahead and put those in the chat. And Wes, I think you said that we do have one participant question.
Yeah, it was actually me.
Okay.
I'm a public school teacher, and so I love seeing that that was a focus in PPC's demands. And so I was just wondering on that, it talks about the resegregation of our public schools and, and why access to public education is so important. And so could you just talk about that and, kind of highlight that resegregation piece?
There are a lot of parts of the US where that resegregation has already happened with school vouchers. It began sort of just with, sending kids to private schools. Sounds fine. And then getting vouchers to send kids to private schools or to a different school created that drain of resources from public schools. Because, of course, the support from the public schools comes from the local tax base. When the local tax base is shrunk, then the resources shrink for that school. And I don't know if it is now because even though I have school age kids in the house, my niece and nephew, I am not a parent, so I'm not as connected with what's going on with schools. I do know that education is one of the things people cannot take away from you. If your brain, if your mind is good, you know what I'm saying? If you've got critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, once you have that, no one can take that away from you unless you, destroy it yourself with like drugs or alcohol or something stupid. But that, when I was growing up, and education was vital, and my household was strict about it because it was seen as a way that you could possibly escape poverty. I don't know if that's still a case, especially since, the military tries to recruit the poor big time still. So,
Yeah.
and I think I saw that some of you people on were from California. You may have to research this, and I'm not brilliant enough with my problem solving or my multitasking. That's it. I don't do that. To be able to get the email link, but there is a initiative in California to revitalize the draft. Is that like frightening? If they got the draft in California, before long it would be country, national. And that just destroys our low income folks. I mean, it destroys all of us. It destroys our country. Yeah, I don't want to go down the road of how egregious war is. It's just crazy.
Yeah, understood. Here is a question from Annette. Does the Poor People Campaign assist folks to apply for those benefits that they're entitled to but don't or can't? Or are there resources that the Poor People's Campaign and that they do make available to help people know what they
Yeah.
qualify for?
At the state level, when people reach out to us, we try to connect them to resources and assistance that can help them. But we are doing the work of movement building. So we're not doing, it's not social service, it's social justice. It doesn't mean we ignore the needs of people, but we encourage them to seek out support where they live and join the work. These people become testifiers at our actions, which means they'll speak about, here is trouble I'm having making ends meet, or I'm not able to get what I need in terms of medical care, or my children aren't. And the number of people that die because they're poor, not, and they don't have health insurance is just immoral.
No, gotcha. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Here's a question from Nelson. Will the Poor People's Campaign have a contingent this summer at the Democratic National Convention?
He will not be in Chicago. I co-founded an organization called Move to Amend, which will be there. So there you go. In June, I don't think we set the date yet, but in June, there will be a mass assembly in DC that the Poor People's Campaign is supporting. And they're starting that next month on March 2nd at state capitals in 30 to 34, I think, states. I'm going to put the states in the chat. We will be going to our state capitals, our general assemblies, the bodies of decision in those states, and making our demands for the third Reconstruction. So the states I just put in the chat, if you're in one of those states, you can go to that state: California Poor People's Campaign, North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, Rhode Island Poor People's Campaign, and get the contact folks so that you can turn up and turn out on March 2nd with your fists raised and your banners held high. One of the things Reverend Barber says is we are a resurrection, not an insurrection. Reminding people, some of us know how to act. And some people don't. You don't want them around. So that's what's up.
Gotcha. Alrighty. I think I lost track of the next question. I think I may have found it. Here we go. So here's one from Tracy. Do you think that poor people generally are infantilized? This happens some with low-income elders, even as well-meaning elder service providers have a tendency to treat seniors as helpless, so they become so. Do the restrictions we put on welfare recipients also do that?
It can. I don't know if I would say actively does, like, present tense, because I can only speak about my own experience and the folks around me and the folks I know. I have seen people give up and think that there's nothing they can do about their situation. And then the next generation feels that same way. And the next generation feels that same way. I've seen that in my 64 plus years. And I can't say there was outside influence that did that so much as the culture in general. And sometimes helpers, especially those who are coming from a religious place. In my limited experience, the worst people that would patronize or shrink the power of low wealth people are people who feel like they're doing it because they're helping the least of these, and they are treating people as if they are the least of these, and none of us are the least of these. If you do, but if someone may have gone there, they drank the Kool-Aid and they believe those lies about themselves. Well, you can also help someone see their own magic, their own power. And if and when you can support someone to advocate for themselves, to go to that person at the social services office and say, you need to get my food stamps done now, today, this week. And when they're able to make those demands in the same way that the masses of people are building to do it with the Poor People's Campaign, you've crossed the line with people, or they've crossed the line that they don't go back from. Once someone has their voice, once they have that fire in the belly, as people used to talk about in the labor union times, 30s and 40s, a fire in the belly, it didn't go away. I mean, it may dampen, it may be brighter sometimes and less bright others, but once you know you have the ability to advocate for yourself, your voice matters, who you are matters, you're not going to go back from that, because it's like something has been turned on that doesn't get turned off. It's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Especially if you get to witness it happening with some people. I got that once or twice in life and it was awesome.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So trying to catch back up. So this next question is from Peg. Has poverty, in your experience and from your perspective, from your view, has poverty gotten worse over the past 40 years? Has it changed? How has it changed? And are there is there evidence of overcoming it through government support?
Yes, yes, and no. So poverty's gotten worse because the wealthy needed it to, because they needed to have billions and obscene amounts of money that you can never spend your whole lifetime. Greed is just crazy. Okay, so that's one yes. And has it changed? Yes, it's changed too. It's expanded. There were people that before 2007, 2008 were doing okay. And, you know, they were also the same people who were saying, I'm doing okay. I'm not really that concerned about these people over here that aren't doing badly. And then predatory loans wiped out a lot of wealth, and corporations merged and created bigger conglomerates and multinationals to rob more money from mostly the government coffers, but also states that then had less money to support social service programs. And what was the last one that would say yes? All I can remember is the last one was yes. Has it gotten worse? Has it changed? And something.
Is there evidence of overcoming it through government support?
Oh, yes, there could be a minimum wage. No, that's not what it's called. Younger people know it. I'm looking at you and Wes. It's
A living wage?
guaranteed, a guaranteed
Oh,
minimum
universal basic
income.
income. Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's the answer, but that could be. There could be services provided at no cost for many things. Electricity, Wi-Fi, and there could be public transportation so that people can get to jobs. There could be places for daycare so that if you're a low-income person and you have a job that pays minimum wage, you're not spending a third to half of it for childcare. Crazy. So there's lots of ways the government could, if it had the political will. That's all that's missing. It's just the will to say, we have to do this. So we have to force their hand to do the moral thing, to do the right thing, and put in every kind of social support that could help eradicate poverty, not just mitigate it, not just make it so that people could survive, but that people can thrive. Yes, we want bread and roses. I want cake and wine. So that's what's up.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. So we do want to honor your time. We know you've got to go eat dinner. So do you have any
I had some slices of chicken breast while y'all were talking. I just put myself off camera. Had a little piece of chicken breast. All right.
No, completely understand that. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to leave with us about how to inspire and encourage all of us to be poverty abolitionists?
Poverty abolitionists. Those are
Yeah,
beautiful words.
that's from the book from Matthew.
Matthew Desmond. I really like that book. I heard him. He spoke to our coordinating committee. It's a North Carolina coordinating committee for the Poor People's Campaign, and it was good. Well, I would say don't fall for the okie doke, meaning be clear. These are systemic problems. Do not allow yourself to accept that, oh, it's just bad. Oh, the poor will always be with us. I'm not trying to down anybody who really likes the Bible. That one, No, the poor will only always be with us if we allow it. And dismantling the systems that keep poverty, racism, classism, homophobia, heterosexism, misogyny in place makes us all free. So think about and do what you can, even if it's just taking one pebble out of this huge wall of crap. It's worth doing. And if we all do what we can do, we'll get there. It's not any one person's job, it's everyone's job. So bring joy to the work and keep on keeping on.
Awesome. Yes. And I just want to echo that sentiment. If a million of us take away one pebble, we can bring down the wall. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
I
you
have
so much for
one
your time.
last thing to
Sorry, go
share
ahead.
with y'all,
Mhm.
if I can. It's nobody asks the question of, so George, what do you do to keep yourself from not wanting to jump off of a bridge? Because it's all rough. And one of my biggest what's the word, ways of dealing, besides prayer and meditation and yoga and the groovy stuff, is music. And
Yes.
I have been so heartbroken and saddened and enraged by what's going on for folks in Gaza these days that I can barely hold on every day. But this song I'm putting in the chat is my parting gift to you. It's beautiful. You might have some tears. I do when I hear it, but that's me. Maybe not you. But it's been joyful and fun to talk to you, and enjoy the rest of the book. And go to your state capitals on March 2nd and say, we need a transformation of this whole society. And, join your brethren and make it happen. It'd be awesome.
Yes. Thank you so much, George. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom and your words.
Oh, thank you, Robin. I'm going to bug you since you're in North Carolina so that we can, get up to some trouble together in a good way.
Yes.
Good
Good
trouble.
trouble.
Yeah, babe. That's it. All right, y'all. Be good. Bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you,
Thank
George.
you. Bye.
Hi. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. And there's a lot of good resources, specifically like reports and people's testimonies. That's what I really love about their reports, is seeing those individual testimonies as part of that, because George spoke to it. There's power when people find their voice and recognize that their voice has power as they tell their story and their experiences. And so I think that's a great thing. Like in Nebraska, our governor was like, oh, I'm not going to do the summer food program that the feds will pay for us for free because that's welfare and I'm against welfare. And then he reversed it because some kids did an amazing presentation, about it. And so, like the organizations that were, letting those kids know that they have a voice and they have power, that transformed access to food for our families in Nebraska over the summer. So love it, love it. Very inspiring. Robin will make sure to incorporate those into our follow-up guide, all the links shared, but really dig around. I was digging a lot during the conversation, so it was cool to see. So, well, we got 30 minutes here to go into our discussion, and I'm gonna wrap on over to our PowerPoint. And for week 3, we had a quote here that just kind of wanted to give a highlight to. The bottom 20% of the income distribution receives $25,733 in government benefits a year, while the average household in the top 20% receives about $35,363. So it's about $10,000 difference. Every year, the richest American families receive almost 40% more in government subsidies than the poorest American families. So something to think on, and some tidbits to share as you talk and organize within your community. So Jamel's going to give us a quick high-level summary of chapters 5 and 6, and then we'll get into our questions. Go ahead, Jamel. Jamel, your mic is off, just a heads up.
There we go. All right, great. Sorry for that. Can you all hear me now? Okay. So this is chapters 5 and 6, which are basically, as you know, I'm glad that Wes provided that quote up front, because to a great extent, it really it stresses a lot of what we're talking about this week. How we rely on welfare as a society and how we actually buy opportunity. The topics that are in these chapters, I'm going to go through 4 of them really quickly. Perceptions of those who are receiving aid. Desmond talks about what our perceptions are of the poor and the popular belief that people are spending aid on luxury goods, drugs, or alcohol, or that they need help because they're lazy. This perception is something, a myth that is out there, and it's perpetuated by others. He also talks about the fact, and Wes's quote, the quote Wes had really summarizes this, that we have tax subsidies for the wealthy. We actually don't spend less on the poor because we can't afford it. Instead, our system provides substantial tax benefits and reductions to the people with means. And we do that because we like it that way. Today, the biggest beneficiaries of federal aid are actually affluent families. And this is done in a way that we don't necessarily see it because they're given tax breaks instead of cash. Desmond says, what if it looked a little bit differently? Would we feel about the way that we tax things and give out aid the same way if we reversed it? If we created greater benefits for those who didn't have funds and gave the cash to the wealthy, it might change our perception with respect to things. He also talks about the fact that liberal cities remain segregated, in part because, notwithstanding the attempts to relocate low-income families, we still suffer from the fact that people will say, not in my backyard, and there are zoning ordinances to maintain racial and class segregation. And finally, a huge theme, and this will be in this week and weeks going forward, is this notion that we have created private opulence and public squalor. In other words, the tax breaks that we provide to the wealthy lead to the underfunding of public goods because of lost revenue. And as incomes grow, we spend more on our own personal consumption and less on public works, leading to a denigration of public services. And then the public services are criticized by both those who use them because of poor quality and those who don't use them because they don't want to pay for them. And then our government ends up being a scapegoat. And you know, it's an iterative cycle that leads to more private opulence and more public squalor. Those are the themes in a nutshell. And now we'll jump into the questions.
Well, thanks, Jamel. I think the quote that Wes put up really leads into our first question, which is Desmond states that the belief that social benefits from the government make people lazy is an example of the propaganda of capitalism. Our question is, what are some other examples of propaganda of capitalism?
I'm
Sarah,
going to
put
ask you
in
to,
chat that oops, sorry, go ahead.
Annette, if you want to, can we get Annette to unmute? Let me see.
let's try it again.
I'm trying. Okay, there I am.
go.
I'm going to
Okay.
keep this. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. How about trickle down economics? That's all I'm saying.
Good statement. Thank you for sharing. Georgianne?
I don't remember, I think it was Max Weber, a German philosopher, who promulgated the idea that if you were successful financially, it's because God chose you for success. And I believe I was brought up a Presbyterian, and that was fundamental to white Presbyterians. Now, my family wouldn't say that, but I picked up on that real early, that if you weren't successful, it was because you weren't chosen. And boy, is that a nasty.
So thank you, Georgianne. And someone put in the chat, Arcata, propaganda is poor people get more government benefits. Obviously, that's not true. I mean, even Desmond states that in his book. They don't receive more benefits, and the reasons why are, a million reasons why, but nevertheless, it's more just propagating this myth of capitalism as being equal opportunity for everybody, and it's not necessarily reality.
And also Kara put in the chat, the bootstraps mythology is capitalistic propaganda. And let's see, someone else wrote, I just saw it, that the wealthy have more because they work harder for it. I can't find, I remember reading it, but I can't find who said it. Someone in the chat did. Oh, here it is. Lucy in the chat said that one.
Yeah, and just before I ask Amelia to unmute, I was going to say that at the 2020 election, no, at the 2016 election, I guess, immediately there were a large number of Democrats who went out to vote early in the day, and that gave the Democrats kind of a sugar boost. And I've heard it said both on the media as well as with individuals I know who are Republicans. Well, of course, all the Democrats voted early because they didn't have to go to work like us. Just appalling. But Amelia, if you would like to share, please.
One of the
You remuted yourself, Amelia. Your microphone is off.
okay.
Okay.
I don't know if it's an example as much as a byproduct of it, but we in this country we tend to just we excuse the rich. There's something about money in the American narrative that allows us to look the other way, okay, when it comes to corruption, corporate corruption, greed. I mean, and you feel you just like there's this kind of collective sigh, but then no outrage. We tend to genuinely excuse that whole entity of like extreme wealth. Okay. And I don't know whether that's a byproduct of the propaganda but it's something that's really bothered me all my life, that we seem to just, when wealthy people are in trouble, there's this still sense of an excuse for it. We tolerate it more so than we tolerate people in poverty.
Thank you for sharing.
And if I can just add to that, that's such a great point, Amelia. We allow the wealthy to use their money to circumvent our laws. I know there's some in previous books that we've read about also, and then Desmond talked about it a little in this book as well. Worker violations, corporate violations, tax violations. We allow the wealthy to buy their way out of responsibility. We allow the wealthy to buy themselves out of adhering to regulations. One of the things they talked about was worker regulations and safety fines, and that the wealthy, they just pay the fine because for them it's a drop in the bucket, and it's more profitable for them to violate the law and just pay the fine for it. So yeah, that's a great point, Amelia. Thank you.
I guess that's a prompt from Wes for us to move on, Peg. He's put the next question up, which I'm going to take.
Exactly.
Really great discussion and great points that people were raising on this. So the next question is, we see taxation as a burden and tax breaks as the state allowing us to keep more of what is rightfully ours. What are some reasons you've heard that people don't want to pay or taxes, or that they resent taxes? Is there any validity to these thoughts or beliefs? And is there a way to make paying taxes something to take pride in, as opposed to making people feel like they're losing something? Now, just you're adding on to that, how much, I mean, when we talk about our taxes, and we feel like somehow we're giving things up, how much visibility do we really have in seeing how our tax dollars are put to use for our own benefit? Peg, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Jamal. I'm very torn about this concept of taxes. So if you think about from the time you wake up in the morning until the time you get to work, how many different government services have you used? Sleep on a government inspected approved mattress, a government inspected approved pillow, water from the spigot, government cleaned and purified, breathing, government purified air, roads, government infrastructure, cars, inspection, all of that. So, there is some validity with what tax dollars go to. But all in all, compared to the amount of tax money that I pay, there's not really a whole lot of return on investment, because people in Congress, first, someone said, it's a hospital of geriatrics. There was someone in politics who said that recently. But secondly, it seems like they do more arguing and carrying on than they actually do in building programs that would help the very people that they're elected to serve. And I think that until a larger portion of our tax money goes to do its fundamental purpose, and that is to take care of its citizens, we won't see as much of a return on taxes as we need to see. I mean, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why there is not government subsidized healthcare at all. But that's a separate question, or a separate discussion altogether. So I don't have an easy answer for taxes, but it's just something I notice is everything is government regulated, but at the same time, not enough is government supported.
Thanks, Peg. Good points. Paula, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go. Yes, we can.
Great. I just have again, just some thoughts, because when I was at door knocking in New York 03 for Tom Swazi, and it's, one of the things my partner and I were talking about is just oftentimes the question of taxes come up. Well, where are my taxes going? And what was fascinating to me is how very well educated and knowledgeable citizens really don't understand where their local taxes go, what's really being funded, what's the difference between, school taxes, property taxes, income tax. So, and I was wondering, Wes, does Building Bridges do any basic civics training on, just for all of us to become very more knowledgeable on how to explain taxes, and then have to drill it down to where we live? But the point that, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's such a hot topic that a lot of emotion gets in the way, and being able to talk about it reasonably and responsibly would be really helpful. And now that we're coming in to get out the vote and knock on doors and just get out and talk to people, which I highly recommend, to be able to feel solid in the responses that we give would be really helpful. And I come from the district, my state senator is Dean Murray, who invented the Tea Party. Taxed enough already here in New York on Long Island. So it's very challenging to break through misconceptions. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you. I love this book, by the way.
Real
Thanks,
quick,
Paula.
I will say I put in the chat, we do have a Civics 101 training, that kind of provides some basic civic education. And then I will remind folks, and I'll do this at the end, but in case anyone can't stay till the very end, next week our training leaders are going to come to book club to do a say this, not that, and I will be sure to pass on to them kind of that idea, or how can we talk about taxes? And because it's been, George mentioned it, Desmond's mentioned it, where the rich don't pay their fair share. And so how can we talk about that and really message that point on taxes? So
Robin, go ahead.
I think one thing that would help, and I understand it's not feasible at a large scale, is making kind of like bond measures and things like that more apparent. And then the things that we vote on specifically for our taxes. So my municipality, we had to vote on a bond to build a new library. So to the second point of your question, things that are a source of pride, like a lot of us here have pride when we go into the new renovated library building, because we're like, we did that, we voted for that. But then there are other things that we don't vote for and we don't get to visibility to, like when they defunded a lot of the or cut funding for public broadcasting. And I'm like, I didn't vote for that. I want my money to keep going to public broadcasting. Why didn't I get to vote for that? So that's another thing. I understand that at scale, it won't make sense for us to be able to vote for like every single thing. But sometimes I feel like if people actually got to see the numbers, like, oh, Congress gave themselves this much of a raise, or, we lost this much revenue because of tax break XYZ, then I feel like more people would say like, hold on, I didn't vote for that. I'm not okay with that. But figuring out how to make it logistically feasible that people will actually pay attention, I think will be a hard lift.
Good points, Robin. As we talk about it, and something I'm going to pick up, Steve put in the chat, the notion of the rise of multinational corporations, allowing offshore tax havens, allowing foreign lobbyists. Basically, a lot of that gets to the fact that corporate America is not paying enough taxes. And to the extent that we've got a culture that says, well, you're a fool if you pay taxes, or taxes are bad, to a certain extent, it's a similar dynamic to people saying, if you're poor, you must be lazy. Somebody is feeding that to us. Well, what are the groups that pay the least share of their taxes? It is the corporate interest. So to a certain extent, some of the narrative about taxes being bad and you should avoid them is actually coming, from those that want everybody to believe that they're bad so that they can support their own efforts to reduce their own share of taxes. That's kind of the way I'm seeing it. Other thoughts on this before we move on to the next question? Wes, I think we should go on then.
Yes, and we are going to move on to our third question. We're not going to be able to hit them all. That's okay. Appreciate the dialogue. And Peg, go ahead with our next question.
Desmond, oops. Desmond writes that during the pandemic, people were perhaps able to take a breath and reevaluate their dependency on the company. How did the work shutdowns during the pandemic impact the way people view their relationship to work? Robin, if you want to go ahead.
Sorry, I think I just didn't lower my hand from the last time. Sorry about that.
Okay. Georgianne.
Well, my personal anecdotal experience was that those that really enjoyed their work figured out a way to continue working. Their companies worked with them. They became virtual. They were not ecstatic about sitting in their bedrooms, but they did it and they still felt some satisfaction. But many people were given the freedom and the leisure and just the time to evaluate their jobs and say, I don't want to be doing this. What else could I do? And some of them figured out some really good, creative new things. I thought it was one of the few positives. There were several positives. There were a lot of negatives, but there were several positives, and that was one of them. And learning to use Zoom was another one, because otherwise we couldn't have our book club.
Thank you for sharing. Tracy, let me see. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Georgiana. In my case, as I said before, I work at a weekly newspaper. We haven't been back to our offices as staff since March 13th, 2020, mainly because my boss and I are the only two full-time people, and she had underlying health issues, so she decided to work at home. I work from home. Our half-time people work from home. So she just gave up her office. Why pay rent for an office that no one uses? And if we need to change the scenery, work at the library or coffee shop or something. It's just, we have a biz. If I have to go take care of a family member in Connecticut or something, I can take my office laptop, and my job is portable. I can watch a meeting Zoom coverage and write a story about it anytime. So really, the people I feel for are teachers, because a lot of the school districts had to hire what they called is it transitional, or the people that help the kids catch up for both socially and emotionally for the stuff they've lost through the COVID, working at home. I think that they have the hardest job out there to get the kids back in the classroom and learning the way they used to, because we lost so much during the pandemic. There's no going back to the way it was.
And what I happened to notice during the shutdown from the pandemic a lot was, people with quote unquote office jobs were working remote, but people who were doing, more low wage jobs, for example, grocery store cashiers,
Public service transportation, yeah.
Amazon drivers, Amazon warehouse packers, all of these kind of, very low level, low paying jobs, they were the ones who were working, who were out there, who were facing the public, so to speak, or at least in the company of others. If you work in a warehouse, you were just working with your coworkers. But, it was disturbing to see that those people in those jobs really didn't have much of a choice to work remote. And Tracy, is your hand up again, or did you
Yes,
just
I
not
just
take
wanted
it down?
to add on to what you just said, Peg. Some of the worst jobs to have during the pandemic were the slaughterhouse employees. They were forced to come in sick to work on the butcher shop floor, whatever they call it, when they were sick. If you worked in one of those jobs, you didn't have much of a life expectancy, and I think that was just the most inhumane thing anyone could have done. Yeah, people have to eat, but you could do it more that sanitary than that, than forcing people to come to work when they're sick. How many times do we read newspaper stories about that?
Exactly.